All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming out this evening, and welcome to our Student Transition Workshop with Trisha Bailey. Just one quick note before we begin, please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. You may use the chat box or the Q&A when asking your questions. I'll be monitoring both. I will read the questions aloud at the end of the event. We'll also be sending the PowerPoint presentation used during this event to all the registrants after the webinar. So don't worry, if you missed something, you will be getting that PowerPoint presentation via email, probably the next day. So I would like to introduce Trisha Bailey, who's a trainer from the Caregivers of New Jersey, one of the leading support coordination agencies in the state. Tonight, Trisha will be discussing information designed to better prepare individuals with disabilities and their families for the transition into adult life services. She will be breaking down the process into easy to understand steps and covering Medicaid eligibility, support coordination, choosing the right support agency, and more. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Trisha.
Thank you so much. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to share this very important, useful information with everyone. And as was mentioned, my name is Trisha Bailey. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And I am a support coordinator as well as the trainer for New Jersey Support Coordination, which is basically Caregivers of New Jersey. So we are actually part of a larger network called the Family Resource Network. So they are a comprehensive family-focused umbrella of organizations designed to meet the growing need for community-based programs and services to individuals and families with a variety of developmental disabilities and chronic conditions. So the Family Resource Network actually consists of 3 affiliate organizations: Autism Family Services of New Jersey, Epilepsy Services of New Jersey, and Caregivers of New Jersey. So specifically, Caregivers of New Jersey is dedicated to providing a central point of contact on caregiving issues. And we've been a leader in support coordination, and we help facilitate individualized and unique planning processes for adults with disabilities. And we really help them make a life plan and put that plan into action. And we use what's called a person-centered approach, which we're going to talk about in a little while. So tonight I'm here to talk about the transition into the adult system. So my presentation tonight is really geared towards parents and professionals that might be in the field of assisting adults with disabilities. It's geared towards those individuals who are between the ages of 18 to 21. So we're thinking about that time when your child is nearing high school graduation and will be exiting out of the school system or exiting out of school-based services or services that are provided through the children's system of care, also known as perform care. So we're talking about transition. And really, as a parent, you want this transition to be a smooth one. So what does a smooth transition look like? Well, it's really going to identify the right combination of ongoing services, but also identifying new supports, new resources, new community connections that are going to help your child and your family succeed. So as you're thinking about your child who's nearing graduating high school, there might be services that they have been continually receiving throughout the years, like maybe occupational therapy, speech therapy. And those are going to be services that you may want to continue. So we want to make sure that as your child's transitioning out of high school, that they can receive those services. But then you're also beginning to think about, well, those years, that 3 to 5 years, after high school, what types of services now that are going to be new that you want to put in place? And so we're hoping that this transition will be a smooth one. So I want to talk a little bit about, what this process is going to look like. So some of you may have children who have received services through New Jersey's Children's System of Care, which is also known as Perform Care. But I'm going to be focusing on the adult system of services, which is the Division of Developmental Disabilities. I'll be referring to them as DDD from this point on. So DDD provides public funding for services and supports that help New Jersey adults ages 21 and older who have intellectual and developmental disabilities live as independently as possible. So services and supports are available in the community from different independent providers, and there's also 5 state-run developmental centers as well. DDD uses a Medicaid-based fee-for-service reimbursement system. So basically what that means is that there's standardized service rates, and services that you want are purchased individually. They're billed in smaller increments. So up until about 13 or so years ago, there was a contract-based system. However, now families can purchase individual services, whichever ones they're interested in, and fall within DDD's policies and procedures. Now, your child, if they're eligible for services with DDD, are going to be enrolled into one of 2 different waiver programs. One is called the supports program, and one is called the community care program. Most individuals are enrolled within the supports program. However, there are certain individuals that may require maybe more supports or have different medical or behavioral needs that will automatically be enrolled within the community care program. The major difference between the 2 programs is that the community care program has a specific part of the budget for residential supports. So these supports can go towards supports provided in a group home setting or supports provided within a family home as well. But they're called individual supports and tends to be for those individuals that have more needs. The community care program also has a waiting list. Anyone can be added to that waiting list, and it may take years for your name to come to that top spot. Anyone can be added to the list though. So just keep that in mind. So I am going to be going through DDD's timeline for graduates. And this is actually a timeline that can be found online. But this timeline is going to be used for those individuals who are aging out of school-based services for this particular school year, the 2020-2021 school year. And just so you know, in general, this timeline really does not change from year to year. So if you do have a child that's not, graduating this year, and let's say we'll be graduating 2 years from now, chances are this is the timeline that you're still going to be using. All right, so let's start this process. The first step and the most important step to begin transitioning into the adult system is to become eligible for Medicaid. So Medicaid is extremely important because in order for your child to be eligible for services through DDD, they have to be Medicaid eligible. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Medicaid, it basically provides health insurance type benefits to those who are disabled, and it pays for things like hospital visits, medications, doctor's visits, certain medical equipment. And you can apply for Medicaid at the age of 18. So once your child turns 18, you can apply for Medicaid eligibility. Now, to be eligible for Medicaid, there's certain criteria that your child will need to meet. They have to be a resident of New Jersey. They have to be a US citizen or a qualified alien. And they also have to meet specific standards for financial income and resources. Now, on top of those criteria, your child also has to fall into one of the 3 different categories you see on this slide. Really, in terms of just today's discussion, it would be that your child is either blind or permanently disabled. So those are the basic criteria for Medicaid eligibility. And here is a link where you can go online to get more information about Medicaid eligibility. You can find the Medicaid eligibility application as well. But quite honestly, you can go to Google and do a simple Google search for New Jersey Medicaid eligibility, and it'll lead you right to that. And again, there is a PDF version that will be sent out to anyone that registered for today. So you don't have to try to write this link down right now. Now, there's also another way to initiate the Medicaid eligibility process, and that's through something called supplemental security income. It's also known as SSI. So SSI is highly recommended for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities who are 18 and expect to pursue services with DDD. You can read more online about SSI, but the program pays a monthly benefit to adults with disabilities who have limited income and resources once they turn 18. So this SSI money or this benefit can be used towards purchasing anything in regards to food, clothing, or shelter. Now, one great thing to note and keep in mind is that the Social Security Administration does not look at parental income and resources or assets. It's only going to look at your child's income. The key point here that I really want everyone to get through this slide is that every New Jersey resident that is eligible for SSI will automatically receive New Jersey Medicaid. So you might be thinking, well, okay, that's great. So what? Well, having SSI is going to protect Medicaid eligibility for the future as well. So most individuals, and not everyone, but most individuals with a disability will have limited income throughout their lifetime. And so they'll have SSI for many years to come. So what's good about that is when they have that SSI, it's going to protect that Medicaid eligibility. And in a few moments, I'm going to explain why that's so important. So here I'm providing a link to how you can apply for SSI. You could also go to your County Board of Social Services as well, and they can talk to you about the basic eligibility requirements as well. So, if you have any question at all about whether or not your child would be eligible for SSI, you can often talk to someone in the office as well. Now, although SSI eligibility doesn't look at parental income, it still looks at your child's income and their financial resources. So an individual can't have more than $2,000 in assets at any given time, or they're at risk for losing SSI. So, a lot of times a parent will ask me, well, what if my child does end up having a job at some point and they're making more than that in a month? Are they going to lose their SSI? Are they going to lose their Medicaid? Well, the short answer to that is no. So there are different programs out there that is geared towards individuals who do work and receive close to or more than the financial limits that SSI, allows. But it's geared toward those individuals that work and helps to protect their SSI and their Medicaid. There's something called New Jersey Workability, for example, that you can read about on this website I'm providing. It's called newjerseyfamilycare.org. So I don't want families to worry about if your child someday works, that they're going to definitely lose their government benefits. There's also special bank accounts out there. There are special needs trusts. So there's places to put this income so that the government doesn't see it and can't count that against your child, okay? So I don't go into a ton of information about that. I give a brief overview. However, if you do have specific questions, feel free, to ask me. And if I can answer them, I'll certainly do so. Okay, so let's say you've gotten to the point where you have your Medicaid eligibility, whether it's through SSI or whether it's just Medicaid eligibility. The next step is going to be to apply for DDD eligibility. Now, this can also be done at the age of 18, as long as your child has Medicaid. So remember, DDD is New Jersey's adult system. So once your child turns 18, you will want to contact the DDD Community Services Office nearest to where you live. And you will find that if you do a Google search online for DDD office locations, there's a link that pops up and you'll just find the office location that's nearest to where you live. That's going to be your main contact. Now, you could also download the DDD eligibility application online. I do provide the link here, but again, do a simple Google search and it will just pop right up. So now one thing to note is that you can apply for DDD eligibility at the age of 18. However, you cannot begin to receive services until the age of 21. So apply at 18, but services don't begin until the age of 21. So there's 3 things that DDD is going to look at to see if an individual meets the criteria to being eligible for services. So the first is that the individual has to meet certain functional criteria of having an intellectual or a developmental disability. I'm going to talk about what that means in a moment. The second is that the individual has to be Medicaid eligible and they have to maintain that eligibility at all times. And then the third is that they have to prove that New Jersey is their primary residence. So one thing I want to note here, you can see in number 2, Medicaid eligibility is really important. Without it, you can't receive services through DDD. Now, if you remember a little bit ago, I mentioned that this is why supplemental security income is so great. So remember, anyone that receives SSI benefits will automatically receive New Jersey Medicaid. And now you just learned that Medicaid eligibility is required for DDD. So I'm hoping that, you can see the connection here. So if an individual has SSI, they're going to have the Medicaid, which is needed for DDD. So there's, a very specific connection and reason why that SSI really is a great benefit for individuals to have. So I just talked about that one of the criteria your child will have to meet is they have to meet the functional criteria of having a disability. So this means that the individual has to have a chronic developmental disability, which can either be physical in nature and or intellectual in nature. It has to have developed prior to the age of 22, and it has to be a lifelong condition. So those are some of the basic criteria. However, this condition also has to substantially limit your child in at least 3 areas of life activity. Now you can see what those areas of life activity are on this chart to the right. So again, they have to be substantially limited in at least 3 of these areas, not all of them. So anything related to do with self-care, economic self-sufficiency, the ability to live independently, communication, learning, mobility, or self-direction. So at least 3 of those things. So if they do, chances are they will meet the criteria, the functional criteria of having an intellectual or developmental disability. All right, so I just want to recap. Step 1 is to become Medicaid eligible. Step 2 is to apply for DDD eligibility. So let's say you get that far. What's going to be the next step? Well, what's going to happen is you're going to receive a phone call from someone at DDD saying, we need to assess your child. And the way that we're going to do that is to complete something called the NJCAT. NJCAT stands for the New Jersey Comprehensive Assessment Tool. Now, this used to be done in person prior to COVID. However, now they're doing it over the phone. But you need the person that is closest to your child to answer and go through this assessment. It's about a 14-page long assessment that's going to assess your child in 3 main areas: self-care, behavioral, and medical. So there's a lot of different questions. It goes into a lot of detail, but it's a really good way for DDD to assess your child, further assess them, to make sure that they're eligible for services with DDD. Now, there's one thing I want to mention, and I talk to families all the time about the NJCAT. You know, as a parent of a child with a disability, through the years, it's been really important for me to see the best in him and kind of be his cheerleader. He's 12 now. And so I know that we always want to look at our children in the best light possible. However, I do want to say for this NJCAT, don't do that. What do I mean? Well, the NJCAT results are going to establish the tier that your child is going to be assigned. Okay, so there are different tier letters, A through E. Now, a tier A individual is an individual that does not require a lot of supports. They don't have as many needs, therefore their budget is the least. Whereas a tier E individual does require the most care, and therefore they get the highest budget. So when you answer the questions, you really want to answer those questions as if your child's having their worst day. And the reason I say this, so I want to give you an example. You know, one of the questions on the NJCAT may ask about, showering. Can your child shower independently, or what type of needs do they have? Now, I know for my son, there's times that he comes out of the shower and he still has shampoo in his hair, or he'll come out and he's half dry but half wet, and I'll need to remind him to get back in there and dry himself off a little bit more. Now, 95% of the time, he's fine. He's independent, but there is that small amount of time where he's not. And so you want to highlight that when you answer those questions, okay? Even if it's a minimal amount of time where they need a particular amount of assistance, you want to answer the question as if it is that 5% of the time. And the reason I say that is that the tier is associated with a corresponding individualized budget. And, many times I will meet as a support coordinator with a family, and we end up going through this NJCAT and realize that when mom and or dad filled this out, there were a lot of discrepancies because they weren't thinking about that 5% of the time. And what might happen is they don't have enough money in their budget for some of the supports and services that they need. Now, oftentimes a parent will say, well, then what happens? Are they stuck at that tier forever? Well, no, your child will be reassessed every 5 years automatically. As a parent, you can request that a reassessment be done. However, DDD can deny that request, or if they do reassess your child, it doesn't always guarantee that the tier is going to change. So really, you want to try to get it right the first time. You want to answer those questions as if they're having their worst day, so that it accounts for those, little things that happen once in a while. And hopefully that will help you get the budget that really you need. So I hope that makes sense. So let's move on. So once that NJCAT is done, DDD will come back and say, okay, you are eligible for services or you're not. If you are, the next step is going to be to complete something called the Support Coordination Agency Selection Form. Now, this form is not going to be filled out until your child is in their last year of school-based services and is either 21 already or they're nearing age 21. Okay, so you complete this form and you submit it to DDD. So I thought it was really important, when I designed this presentation, to talk a little bit about, well, what is support coordination? Your support coordinator is going to be really important in your life for years to come. So I do want to touch on what is it. So support coordination is a division-funded service that assists individuals who are eligible for DDD services to gain access to the supports that they need, whether that's in the community or through the state. Now, the great thing about support coordination is that, well, DDD requires anyone that is eligible for services with them to pick a support coordination agency. However, it's funded by DDD. So your child does not have to use any of their DDD budget to pay for support coordination services. So what do support coordinators do? Well, we do 4 main things: individual discovery, plan development, the coordination of services, and monitoring. So I just want to briefly touch on each of those. So when you get that first phone call from your support coordinator, one of the things that you probably don't want to do is say something like, hey, what kind of services do you have for my child? Because your support coordinator is really not going to know the answer to that until they really get to know your child. So support coordinators use something called a person-centered approach to get to know your child and your family. So it means that we're going to involve your child from the beginning to the end. We're always going to keep their needs in mind in the forefront, their desires, their short-term and long-term goals. It's a very individualized planning process. And one of the ways that we can really get to know your child is by filling out something called the person-centered planning tool. It's also known as the PCPT. And so this is a very valuable tool for a support coordinator, and it's really going to help us get to know you so that we can connect you to the services and supports that you need and want. So what we do is we're going to eventually write something called the ISP, which stands for Individualized Service Plan. Now, throughout elementary school and junior high and high school, most likely your child has had an IEP, an educational plan. Well, it's very similar in the adult system. However, it's an individualized service plan. And so we're going to take all of the information from that NJCAT assessment and that person-centered planning tool, and we're going to use that to write the ISP. And then we're going to enter services and supports into that plan. And DDD and Medicaid, they kind of take care of all of the billing aspects, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And the great thing about support coordination is that your support coordinator is already going to be familiar with DDD's policies, procedures, so you don't have to think about those things either. So that's a bonus. So another thing that support coordinators do is they do monitoring. So, we want to be following up to make sure that the services in the plan are being delivered, that your child is remaining safe and healthy at all times, that progress is being made towards your goals, and also that they're staying within the budget that they have. So there's a few different things that we do to monitor. So it's monthly contact. So every month you're going to receive a very short check-in phone call from your support coordinator, just checking in either on your child or, if, your child's able to talk to your support coordinator, we love to talk to your child as well. Prior to COVID, we would do a quarterly face-to-face visit, either at home or at a program that they attend or a job site. However, that has been unable to happen due to COVID, but hopefully we'll be starting again soon. And then every year, once a year, we're going to have an anniversary planning meeting. So just like you had IEP meetings once a year in the school district, we're going to meet once a year to just update the plan, see how progress is being made, implement any changes. So that is what monitoring looks like. Now, here is a table that lists all of the different services that can be funded through the DDD budget. Now, I give a webinar that goes into a lot more detail about each of these services that if you're interested in finding out when that's going to be airing, I'm more than happy to share that. But you'll see there's a whole different array of services that can be accessed using the DDD budget. And again, your support coordinator is going to know, the DDD policies, to get these services for you. They're going to have community contacts and a network of providers that they're familiar with. So if you're interested in respite, we'll connect you to known respite providers in the community. Okay, so for the remainder of my presentation tonight, I just want to go into a little bit of detail on what this timeline looks like on a month-to-month basis. Okay, so from September through June, and this is kind of that last year of high school that I'm really talking about. This is a time for you as a parent and even your child to begin preparing and planning for graduation. So there's a great website I want to share with you guys. It's called planningforadultlife.org. And they have a variety of resources available for students between the ages of 16 to 21 and their families. There's a lot of information on there. There's different webinars that are coming up. They have a webinar archive. They will list different opportunity expos that are going on in different locations throughout the state. These are mostly being held online now, but different community providers will offer information about the services, that they offer. It's a great resource out there. The other thing that you want to do is to begin learning about support coordination in different agencies that are around the area that you live. Now, there is a place called the Boggs Center, BOGGS. They're through Rutgers University, and they offer some great resources about support coordination. So they have this, it's easier to view than to print out because it's so many pages, but they have all of the support coordination agencies in the state listed by, the counties that they serve. They also go through a list of, how to choose a good support coordination agency. So, there's over 160 agencies out there right now in the state of New Jersey. So you want to start using this time to research the different agencies that are in your location. The other thing that I really highly suggest doing is to fill out that person-centered planning tool, or at least take a look at it. This planning process is so important, and to help assist your support coordinator in the near future, if you take a look at this person-centered planning tool, you'll get an idea of the information that is going to be important for your support coordinator to know about your child. So DDD does have a link to a sample person-centered planning tool, and I have the link here. But I would really recommend you take a look at it and even start filling it out so that you have an idea of that information your support coordinator is going to want to know about. Now, between the months of February and March, this is around the time where DDD will let you know that it's time for you to choose a support coordination agency. So there's a form that you would fill out. You're going to identify both a first choice agency and a second choice agency. Now, most people tend to get their first choice. The only reason why you wouldn't is if the agency you choose has maxed out the amount of individuals that they can serve for your particular county. But chances are you will tend to get your first choice, but choose a second just in case. So I do want to go into, what to look for in a support coordination agency. And I have gotten this information from the Boggs Center that I just mentioned, but these are some things that really, you can call a support coordination agency and basically interview them and ask them some of these questions. So the first thing you want to ask is, are there support coordinators training, or are there support coordinators getting trained in how to write the ISP and that person-centered planning tool? So I know our agency, I'm the trainer for our agency, and I am training our support coordinators on how to write not just the plan itself, but how to write a good plan. And I provide ongoing training to our support coordinators as well. So training is a huge aspect. Ask them if they have a trainer, on staff, and how often they receive training. The other thing you might want to ask is, do they have over at least 10 to 12 years of experience? Some people will disagree with me on this. However, I do feel that there's a real bonus to choosing an agency that has a lot of experience. There's agencies that are popping up around the state all the time. And that's not saying they're a bad agency at all, but I think there's bonuses to choosing an agency that has experience. They're going to be well-versed in the ISP and the PCPT. They are going to be really familiar with DDD's policies and their procedures. They're also going to have a really good network of community providers. So, when you come looking for, dehabilitation, they should have a great network of providers that they have experience working with that they can recommend. So I think there is something to be said about an agency that has experience. The other thing is the agency familiar with the resources and information in your county? More specifically, ask them, are you going to assign me a support coordinator that either lives in my county or a county near me? Okay, so for example, I live in Sussex County. You guys most likely tuning in today are in Bergen County. You really wouldn't want me to be your support coordinator because I'm not going to be really familiar with a lot of the provider agencies in Bergen County. I'm familiar with what's going on in Sussex and Warren counties specifically, okay? Now, most agencies do have different support coordinators scattered throughout the state. Most of us work remotely, but ask the question, are you going to assign me a support coordinator that at least lives near where I live? The other thing you want to ask, will they have your child's plan up and running within 30 days? So there's really never a good reason why it should take more than a month from that first phone call from your support coordinator to get that plan approved. If they're going to tell you it's going to take a few months, really there's never a reason why it should take that long. Some other things that, I would recommend asking, can they connect you to local support groups if that's something that you would be interested in or feel that, would be of benefit to you? Another thing is, are they a recommendation possibly from someone you know? So, we ask for movie recommendations, restaurant recommendations. Maybe you have friends who have a child with a disability who does have a support coordinator. Ask them who they're using. Are they happy with that agency? Or maybe some of the other families within your child's graduating class. Talk about it. Find out who they've interviewed and try to get a recommendation from someone. Also, are they available for emergencies 24/7? So, a good agency is going to have some sort of on-call support after hours. It's really great for, in those rare, but it does happen, times where you really need to connect with someone. If they have an on-call system in place, it's a bonus. The last thing too that I think is a real bonus is to choose an agency that approves their own plans. So there are certain agencies that DDD has released to approve their own ISPs. So what that means is that you don't have to wait for DDD's approval. The support coordination supervisors can do it. So let's just say if you need a change to your plan last minute, that change can be done within days instead of a week or maybe more. So an agency that can approve their own plans is a bonus. Now, if you go on the Boggs Center website and find the giant list of support coordination agencies throughout the state, what the Boggs Center does is they have a little black diamond right next to the agency name that will identify those agencies that can approve their own plans. So it kind of helps you figure out who those agencies are. So of course, I'm going to give a plug for Caregivers of New Jersey. We've been approving plans for well over 15 years. We're one of the 3 original support coordination agencies in the state of New Jersey. And I would love to share more about how we can serve, you and your family. Okay, now to sum everything up as we prepare to close for tonight, around the month of April is when you'll actually receive your support coordination agency assignment. So again, this is going to be based on your first or second choice that you chose, as well as the available capacity of the agency. So it is around the month of April where you'll get that official assignment and that first phone call from the support coordinator. Okay, April to June is the time where the actual plan is going to be developed. Okay, so, you know, as your child is nearing high school graduation, you know, your new support coordinator can attend your child's exit IEP meeting, which I think is so invaluable. It allows us to really, you know, talk to maybe, you know, some of the individuals on the child study team and really help that smooth transition that I talked about in that first slide. So that's something that can happen. And, you know, it's just going to be a time of a lot of communication with your support coordinator and your support coordinator filling out that person-centered planning tool. And really what's going to happen is you're going to talk about what the needs your child has. You know, how do you see them spending their days once they graduate? And, you know, as your support coordinator gets all of that information, they're going to connect you to community providers. So if you're interested in a day program, for example, your support coordinator is going to say, okay, here's the names of 3 different agencies that I know are good. You're going to have to call them. You're going to have to interview them, so to speak, or maybe go visit them. You're ultimately going to make the decision of who you want to choose. Now, once you decide on who you want to choose, your support coordinator will help you, you know, set up a planning meeting, a more official meeting, write it into the plan, take care of, you know, the payments and everything like that. But there is going to be some work that you as a family are going to have to do in making those decisions on the providers you want to work with. So, you know, finally, the goal should always be to have the ISP completed and approved by the time your graduates. So that really services can begin upon graduation. You know, one of the things that personally as a support coordinator, I hate to see is a child graduate and then they're sitting around for a few months, not doing much of anything. You know, to give you an example, I had just started support coordination a few years ago, and I had met with a family from Warren County. And I remember calling them on that first day and them saying, I need you to know that my son graduates June 18th. He needs a place to go on June 19th. And so I remember feeling a little overwhelmed, like, okay, how am I going to make this happen? But you see, the thing is with their child, due to his disability, changes in routine were really difficult for him. Any change in routine could trigger really negative behaviors. And so they were trying to avoid that. So understanding that, you know, I began to talk with the family in February and March. I shared different provider agencies with them. And, you know, once they chose an agency they wanted to use, we wrote the plan, we got it approved. And in all honesty, on June 19th, that van was coming to pick him up at 8 a.m. to take him to his new program. Now, there was a lot of different steps in that process, but all that to say, you know, we talked at the very beginning of this presentation tonight about a smooth transition and what that should look like. You know, with the proper communication, along with a trustworthy and experienced support coordination agency, the transition into the adult system really can and should be a smooth one. And I hope, you know, that all I shared tonight has helped make this process maybe seem a little overwhelming for those of you who do have children that are nearing this time, who are in this time. You know, I hope it's been of help to you. And so, you know, with that, I just want to share my contact information with you. You know, one of the things I find joy in is helping families walk through this process. And I have parents that will call me all the time and say, okay, I got SSI and Medicaid, what do I do now? And so I love helping families. So please feel free to contact me either by email or my work cell number, which is there. Also check out our website, njcaregivers.org. We would love to serve your family and help walk you through that process as well. So thanks again so much for allowing me to share this information tonight. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come up.
And just as a reminder, you can put your questions in either the Q&A or the chat box. I'm looking at both. And Trisha, I'm just going to give people a couple minutes.
Yeah, no problem. I also know that sometimes parents have very specific questions in regards to their own, family needs. So again, if you don't feel comfortable asking a question, via typing it, feel free to email me as well.
All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A box. So Trisha, thank you once again very much for coming out tonight and giving this lovely informative presentation for us. And I'd also like to thank everyone in the audience for coming out and attending tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.